Everyone's got their trauma, but they could be something called positive trauma. There can also be negative trauma.
He created this post that said, if you are suffering from anxiety and depression, most likely you don't need another pill from your doctor. You're not living in congruency with who you really are.
There's truth to that.
Wow.
The body has the ability to heal itself. You just need to give it that environment to do so.
So it's really our perception and the story and the belief of what is happening in our lives that is probably causing us the agony.
I've seen people's computer screens where they have almost 50 different tabs open. It's crazy. I'm like, but that's someone's brain. How many things that they're firing? There's no way to calm that brain down. We live in this environment that's constant stimulation.
All right, so I've never had anyone by the name of Dr. Rewire on the show, but I am insanely excited to have you.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it, brother.
Was this a nickname you gave yourself, or was it somebody else?
So I wasn't smart enough to create it. I got to be honest with you. My name is Dr. Trivedi, and first name is Alok. And it's like people could never say my first name, right? They think it's Alok, or they say, "Hey, do you have the keys to Alok?" I'm like, "Okay, I'm really 9 years old." And Trivedi was pretty simple, but people can butcher any name they want to. They say, "You don't look Italian." I'm like, "I look Sicilian. What are you talking about?" But a buddy of mine who's a branding genius and a marketing guy, he goes, "You rewire the brain. That's what you do. You should be Dr. Rewire." I was like, "Sounds good to me." I'm like, Dr. Rewire. And then, so now I'm Dr. Rewire. And it's like, how many people know LL Cool J's real name? Nobody.
Right. No, I don't know his name, but
so eventually no one will know my real name, and I'll be Dr. Rewire, and I'll be okay. It'll be all right.
I just want to see you on a microphone, rap it, say, "Don't call it a comeback." I've been here for years.
I got Rob Bass down, let me tell you.
Oh my gosh, that's great. So you have, so you currently go from back and forth from Chicago to Miami. You've been to chiropractic school, actually here in St. Louis. You've been to Logan. But I'm so curious, like, how did you get started in this particular specialty?
I think it's been an evolution, Larry. It hasn't been overnight, right? Like, I remember, honestly, it was like I was in physical therapy school, and I was on my way to becoming a physical therapist. And I loved working out, loved training since I was a kid. Even though I didn't understand what I was doing as a fat kid. I mean, I'd have a sleeve of Oreos for breakfast on a Saturday morning watching Disney. I don't know if anyone can remember that, right? But we didn't know any different.
No, yeah.
And so I wanted to be strong, so I'd lift weights, but I had no diet, no nutrition part of it. And then I went off and I was doing physical therapy school because my dad was like, "Oh, you like the muscles, you like all that stuff." And then I got into chiropractic school by accident. It wasn't like I was there at my PT school, and there was a booth there, and I was just trying to impress a girl. Like, I was just trying to show her like I had some ambition in my life. I filled out some information, and my dad got a bunch of information for her, and he said, "You'd really like this." And so I got into chiropractic school and fell in love with it. I fell in love with the whole principle. Most people don't realize that chiropractic is not about back pain and neck pain. It's actually about the entire body. It's about connecting all three aspects of the body, the mind, body, the spirit, all of it. And in St. Louis, you would know more, right? But because it's just kind of ingrained in that community. But outside of that, people don't really get that. Because I was on my way to medical school. I was on my way thinking about going to MD school because that's what you're supposed to do as an Indian guy. That's what you do. You go to medical school or up with 7-Elevens, one or the other. Like, it's just one or the other. And I said, you know what? But you know what? I wasn't doing that hot. I basically was struggling with PT school. And long story short, one of my roommates gave me a Tony Robbins CD set.
The Edge?
The Edge, that's the one.
Dude, I had the same set in the same, probably time period you did.
Name one.
Oh my God.
So I got the Edge and I listened to it for a week and I'm like, what is this thing? Right.
Yeah.
And I started to shift. I started to change. And so I went off and I was like, I need to figure this out. I need to understand why this whole works. And chiropractic was just so brilliant because it was about understanding the neurology, why it all worked. But then, then I did Tony stuff, or not just Tony stuff, any NLP, it kind of stopped working. I wanted to understand the whole mechanism behind it. And so I got into chiropractic school. Fortunate enough for me, got some great mentors in chiropractic and the people around it. And then ended up building a practice and going into practice and failed out of practice at first. and came back, opened a practice, and then all of a sudden I was seeing 1,250 people a week in a matter of 16 months, excuse me. It was ridiculous. But I wired my brain to do so. But then I wanted to understand why and how. And so then I studied neurology, functional medicine, functional nutrition, all the things behind it to understand how does this mind-body connection really work? How do we think? How do we really understand it? Because it kept on asking me, right? If you listen to the story, I went from muscle to nerve. And I was, okay, well, what makes the nerve work? It's the brain. Okay, well, what makes the brain work? It's the way that we think. And so then I had to study, psychoneurology and psychoneuroimmunology and everything behind it. And I was like, because I want to understand, how does the whole thing make sense? And that's kind of been the journey.
Was there in your time where you really kind of started to get interested in this and research this, was there a certain book that made this quite a bit more clear that you're just like, oh man, there's a lot here and I can't wait to learn more?
One book? No.
Okay.
There wasn't one book that shifted it. It was like little pieces and tweaks. And I was fortunate enough, Larry, to have just great mentors, right? Like guys like Bob Proctor were a mentor of mine, right? D. Martini is a mentor of mine. You got Larry Markson was a mentor. Fred Schofield was a mentor of mine. Not Tony directly, never Tony directly, but Brian Tracy was a mentor of mine. Steve Siebold is a mentor. Bill Gove, the worst. Like I've had 130 legendary mentors over my career. And now, like right now, one of my biggest and best mentors is Damon John, right? Like, so I've had these amazing mentors that have just guided me through life to show me like, oh, here's the next thing. Here's the next thing. Here's the next thing. And I'm still a student. I still act like a student.
Wow. What have you, so is rewiring your brain, I don't want to oversimplify it, but is it simply changing the way you think? I mean, there's probably a lot more to it than that, correct?
There is. There is. It's like saying I got heart surgery.
Right.
Right? It's like, heart surgery. There's so many levels to the heart surgery, but simplifying it, yeah, it is changing the way that you think, but it's actually connecting the nerves that connect to make you think the way that you do. Right? Because in the brain, it's really wires that are connected that make you think. So if this wire connects to sit and say, oh, I like the color red on a chair, then, oh, cool, that makes sense. Then every time I see a red chair, I'll like it. Or if this wire connects and says, I hate that color red on a chair, every time I see the red chair, it's going to hate it. Right? And so our brain is nothing more than a set of these wires that are coming together that are allowing us to create thought. And how do we create that thought? Then how do we take that thought and adapt to life and the neurochemistry behind it? And the neurochemistry sounds scary, but it's just a bunch of signals that are going back and forth in the brain that are saying, this is good, this is bad, this is good, this is bad. I like this, I don't like this. That's really the essence of it.
So I know before we hit record, we started talking about, things like dopamine, right, serotonin. Mm-hmm. I mentioned, GABA and that type of thing. Yeah. Is it most important for us to understand where those neurotransmitter levels are at before we can attack anything? I
think so.
Okay.
I think we live in a world in health today where everything is a symptom. I've said for many years now that the body is it's your nervous system and your hormone system, which is called a neuroendocrine system. The endocrine takes the messengers from the brain to the rest of the body to turn the pancreas on, to turn the liver on, to turn muscles on. Like everything is through these hormones in the body, right? Through thyroid, all that stuff. But it really starts up here. It starts from the neurotransmitters that are connecting to that hormone to do that. So the way that we think is ultimately the secret to your health. It really is. We talk about, if you listen to every great doctor and podcaster, everyone, here's what they say. You got to have stress management. How? Well, you meditate. You jump in some cold plunges. Yeah, you do a sauna here and there, and you sit in a jacuzzi, and that's relaxation. No, that's not. All that's doing is activating the parasympathetic. You meditate, you're activating the parasympathetic nerve for a little while, and then you go back into your real life. That's an escape of your reality rather than managing your reality.
I can see that. Yeah, I can see that. It's interesting you say that because I'm not a big meditator.
Yeah, it's hard.
It's yeah. I mean, I sit in some still silence. I actually just kind of started doing this practice, and I've been, my goal is right now I'm just doing a minute and a half. But what I've noticed is, and maybe I haven't just been doing it long enough, but it's that very thing. It's like I feel great in that moment, but then depending on what the day brings, I might not feel that great later on. So, but I'm sure a lot of it probably has to do with the fact that I'm not, maybe I haven't rewired correctly.
Yeah, well, rewiring, I like to say it this way, right? A lot of people use this term rewire, and over the last 5-7 years, it's become a big buzzword and I hope I had something to do with that, I think, but it's become a big buzzword, people using that word. But rewiring is not arbitrary. In my world, rewiring is about when the event and the emotion become balanced. And that's really the only time you really rewire something. But when you're trying to meditate, for example, right? That's a great example. Meditation is great. And there's nothing wrong with calming the nervous system and taking deep breaths. And I think it's super valuable. But then, okay, you got 4 kids that you're running around after, and they're screaming at you, daddy, daddy, daddy. You went from calm state to hyperactive super fast. And then you need to, I don't think the goal of life is to sit in a meditative state. I think the goal of life is to live life in a meditative state, which is a very different experience.
Can you repeat that?
I don't think the goal of life is to live life and constantly to meditate to get out of the state. I think the goal of life is to live life in a meditative state.
That's fascinating. So how do we, let's back up for a second.
Sure.
And let's talk about just men in general and like what we deal with, what we probably the things we experience.
Yeah.
What do you find when people present with symptoms or the things that they say? Like, so for instance, one of the things that I help men with, the number one thing I help men with is marriage, right? So when I sit down with a man, I really try to unpack everything that's going on in his relationship with his wife, what he wants, what the problems are. And I'll tell you, everybody's a little different, but then again, some of the symptoms are very similar as to everybody else and what they're feeling. So when a patient presents, and I'm thinking probably even like more of a male patient, in his late 30s or 40s, like what is he usually presenting with? Like, what are the things he's telling you?
Typically they're burned out.
Yeah.
Or exhausted.
Yeah.
They're going to sit and say they don't feel the juice isn't there with their partner anymore.
Meaning like libido?
Libido is right.
Okay.
Right? The sexual drive isn't there the same. And so they feel like, and they're running out of energy, and they feel burned up, and they feel trapped in their job. They feel trapped in their work, and they're looking to feel fulfilled in their life. Ultimately, they're like, is this it? Like, I'm burned out and exhausted, and what did I sign up for? That's typically the internal conversation, right? And there's different ways that men will handle it. Since we're talking about men specifically here, different ways men will handle it. They'll go out and say, you know what, let me get together with the guys Wednesday night. It's get together at the bar, have some drinks, talk about, the life, go to the game, watch the Rams. Well, they don't even have the Rams there anymore now, right? I'm thinking way back, right? I was there during the Kurt Warner days.
All right. Same here, man. Same here.
But they go watch football, and that's kind of their escape. And they don't really end up doing anything inspirational. Dr. Mark Coleman talked about it, and he said typically around the age of between 35 and 39, humans will go through this psychological shift. And the psychological shift becomes that they have a choice to make, typically around that age. They live their life. They realize that they've, in essence, are going to either subordinate to everybody else, or they're going to live their inspired state. They're going to move on to what they want to. Typically, what I've found is those who are security driven, typically, and there's no right or wrong, good or bad, end up subordinating more for the comfort of their current life. They don't make any shifts and changes. What they'll do is they'll go out and they'll go get testosterone. They'll go get these supplements and think that's life. But they'll choose, what I call choose to stay there, and that's perfectly fine. And then others will sit and say, you know what, I'm going to make a big radical change. And sometimes it's a midlife crisis. Sometimes it's something that they got to do. Sometimes they do leave. Sometimes they do leave a marriage. Sometimes they do stay in a marriage. Sometimes they say, things have to shift in the marriage, whatever the case may be, but they make a shift in their life. Those that don't make a shift are the ones who end up usually with what I've seen observationally, not and more anecdotally than in a scientific study, is that the testosterone starts to drop off. And that's where the challenges start to come in, that their testosterone starts to drop off because they don't have the excitement in their brain for their life.
Really? So living this authentic, fulfilled life has an impact on not only our brain, but testosterone.
It does. Testosterone, estrogen, DHEA, cortisol levels completely.
Wow. So what kind of devastating effects are we looking at? Like, I guess, and I'm sure it's all individualized, but like just on average, what do you see?
It could be anything. Like, I hate to, it could be literally any cascade of things. It could be things as, we're saying low libido is one thing, but it could be digestive issues. It could be GERD. It could be muscle wasting. It could be hair loss. It could be, just not feeling themselves. It could be IBS. It can lead into these types of states. Digestive disturbances completely can be there. I don't want to say autoimmune disorders, but statistically speaking, well, it's definitely going to lead to eating like crap, drinking like crap, and taking care of yourself like crap.
What about like skin issues, like eczema and that kind of thing?
Well, that's where I was going, because that leads to autoimmunity.
Wow. So, and all this, is this reversible?
Everything's reversible. Let me say this. Yeah. We can't say that anything is curable, right? Because that's the medical world. But is it reversible? I've always said since I started school back with you, I said, if the body can degenerate, it can also regenerate. We just have to make it the right environment that it can regenerate.
So true. And I'm thinking the environment that our bodies live in, especially in this day and age. Like, I cannot remember what documentary. I love health documentaries. Yeah. Even if I don't agree with them, I just love anything health related. I just love to watch documentaries. And the documentary I just watched was talking about all the horrific preservatives, additives, all the things they put in processed foods, like the things that are just downright poison to us. And I'm thinking, like, if we're already in this exhausted, overwhelmed state, our brain isn't functioning, and then we drink alcohol, we eat processed foods. I mean, like, that is just one grenade after another, isn't it?
All day long. And the cause of illness, for the most part, is not one thing. It's chronic stress. Chronic inflammation becomes the issue, right? If you go to the gym and you tear a bicep, you're going to get inflamed. Or if you hit your knee against a curb or something like that, it's going to get inflamed. But if you actually go and you deal with the psychological stress over a period of time, long term, that's more damaging to the body than anything else. That's more inflammatory.
Is that how it happens? Is it so chronic stress leads to inflammation, and then is it inflammation that leads to problems?
It's chronic stress that leads to inflammation. You also have, now depending on who you're going to talk to, right? The brain guy is going to say that it's stress that's going to lead to inflammation, but now let me take more of a holistic picture on this. You have chronic stress that's going to lead to inflammation. You're going to have chronic diet that's going to lead to inflammation. You put preservatives, anything that is refined sugars, processed, that's going to lead to inflammation. Now you overwork and overexercise, that's going to lead to inflammation. And then you get a lack of sleep in that, that's also going to lead to inflammation, right? Now you wind that all together with someone who's trying to survive life and trying to make money and survive financially, and that's stressed out, that's also going to lead to inflammation. That's why I call it the 5 pillars of health are really mind, body, and the unshakable mind, the unshakable body, the unshakable diet, the unshakable sleep, and unshakable wealth and money. You have to have all 5 of those together to decrease that inflammatory state.
And how do you know if you're inflamed? Is it symptomatic?
You don't. Well, you don't really know if you're inflamed. You could have inflammation from, you may not even know it. You can go look at your, there's a test called the HCRP, which looks at the inflammatory markers. There's better tests out there that are used, something called glycans, called glycan H. You can do a glycan H test, and that'll tell you your inflammatory markers in your cells at the cellular level. It's wild when you do that test. and you can actually go ahead and take that test and see, here it is. Now, psychologically, there's no test. Well, there is a test, but we just don't talk about it. That's what we do, right? When we look at the testing, we look at what we call the mental performance test, the Dr. Rewire test, or what we're calling it, is looking at all the neurotransmitters of the brain and see what stress level are you really under? What is the stress level that you're actually under? And you look at the 5 neurotransmitters that my main 5 that we talk about. There's hundreds of neurotransmitters. I want to be very clear with that, right? Hundreds of neurotransmitters. But we look at the 5 that will tell you your emotional state: dopamine, norepinephrine, things like that.
So dopamine, norepinephrine, serotonin, would that be one?
Yeah, so dopamine, norepinephrine, epinephrine, serotonin, and oxytocin are the 5 basic ones that we use.
Wow.
Now, there's more. There's glutamate, there's GABA, there's PEA, there's histamine. Of course, but these, for simplicity's purposes of discussion, those are the 5 main ones we look at. And from that, we can basically see someone's emotional states.
So what do you see out of the ones you were talking about? Are there ones for men that are more problematic?
It's believe it or not, it's not just a gender specific thing. I don't see it gender specific.
Okay.
I see it translated across the board. I see dopamine levels low across the board. If you're an entrepreneur, your dopamine is going to be low more often than not.
And what are the symptoms with that? Like what are symptoms of low dopamine?
It's this. You're going to jump on this phone all day, every day. You're going to need to chase a goal. You're going to need to have your brain attentive. Like you're saying, it's hard to meditate, right? So it's hard to meditate, you're going to sit there and say, why can't I calm my mind? Because your brain is always trying to find something, can never relax. Because dopamine is low, it's not regulated. So you're going to feel lower than that. Serotonin is going to be low. Serotonin is made in the stomach. 94% of serotonin is made in the stomach. That's your I feel grateful state. Typically, people who live in guilt or shame have lower levels of serotonin, is what I've seen.
Wow.
For observation.
Is this, I just read, do you know who Dr. John Deloney is?
I don't know him.
He's going to be one of Dave Ramsey's successors over at Ramsey Solutions, but he's got a PhD in psychology, and he wrote a book called Building a Non-Anxious Life. And he talked about dopamine, and he said, if you're really low on dopamine, he described it almost exactly the way you did, but he said, relaxation will feel like stress. And it's very, very true. Like if you give someone, I think, who's low on dopamine, or like an entrepreneur, sitting idle, it almost doesn't feel right. And is that an indicator that so let me back up with that question. It's an indicator of low dopamine. Is it something that we are doing on purpose and we just don't know it or see it?
It's our society. It's every day. It's every day what we do in our life, right? That's why I grab the phone, because it's the first thing we do. We get up in the morning, we start scrolling. I got to look from this app to this app to this app to this app. Your computer screens, right? I have 4 or 5 of these, 4 or 5 widgets up. I've seen people's computer screens where they have almost 50 different tabs open. It's crazy. I'm like, but that's someone's brain. How many things that they're firing? There's no way to calm that brain down. We live in this environment that's constant stimulation, blue light. We're not grounding. We're not allowing the brain to relax in that. So that becomes issue. So I'm not a PhD, but I agree with him 100%. It's hard work. I just got off a call with one of my clients today, and she's like, I'm going to Japan for 2 weeks, and I'm stressed out of my mind. I'm like, why are you stressed out of your mind? She's like, is everything going to be okay? What's going to happen?
The world's going to come to an end.
I'm like, you're an attorney. You do everything via email anyways. Who cares? Right? And she's like, yeah, but still. And I'm like, this is that dopamine factor. I'm like, you've got to go there and shut it off so you allow your body to reset. And I said, you know what's interestingly enough? I remember in my own life when I struggled with that. And I still do struggle with it from time to time. There's no question, right? We have stresses. The whole point is, I think that sometimes people try to avoid and live without stress. That's not life, right? That's what I'm saying. The whole point is live life managing that stress in that meditative state. So it took me, the first time I ever did that, 2 weeks to get my body to calm down. After 2 weeks, I feel like my adrenals relaxed and my body got calm. But I think you're right that it does take a lot of work to relax for people, because I always got to be doing something. Got to do something. If I'm not doing something, I don't feel normal.
Yeah.
That's a low dopamine state.
Interesting. Okay.
Typically. I
What
don't want to say
about
absolute, but typically.
and then the low serotonin state, that's more like gratitude, like, or happiness, or maybe content.
Yeah, happiness, they say that's the happiness. And it's literally what I found the emotions that this person carries is I'm not good enough. I feel shame. I feel bad about myself. And typically you can see their posture. It's usually slumped over a little bit. As my history began as a chiropractor and I watched it, I saw the posture shift downward and they're looking down versus looking up, right? And their posture isn't looking right. And so typically those types of individuals, now again, these are typical. I'm not sitting here citing sources by any capacity. This is just my own observation. I do want to be clear with that. Because I don't think we've done these sources yet, but we do EEGs on people's brains and we can see these shifts and patterns in their brains. And we see the numbers change. We see people's brain ages drop from 42 to 24 in 40 minutes with the work that we're doing. And so typically serotonin, though, is a huge part of how they feel about themselves. But the main neurotransmitter, Larry, since we're talking about neurotransmitter, I'll just kind of take us there if that's all right, is the one you really want is oxytocin. Oxytocin, people think it's the love neurotransmitter.
Right.
Everyone's heard about it, right? It's actually not the love neurotransmitter. It's the connection neurotransmitter. And it's about connecting to yourself. Are you really authentically connecting to yourself? Because when you are connecting to yourself, then what happens is that your oxytocin level is high and you feel grounded, you feel centered, you feel connected to yourself. If you look at someone's neurotransmitters and oxytocin, struggling relationship, oxytocin is going to be low because they don't feel connected to anything.
And then how do you raise that? Is that something active? Like, hey, just go out and connect with somebody, or is it something different?
You can. I mean, you'll have the you can go out and meet someone and the oxytocin goes up, but that'll be a falsified up, right? But I love, if you look at people, like a lot of guys, I know a lot of guys on this conversation are married, but a lot of single guys or single ladies out there, you look at their oxytocin levels, typically lower because they're searching and they need dopamine to kind of go up to make them feel better. Oxytocin kind of restabilizes all of it. When you feel better about yourself, you stabilize all of it.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. I read this, it was a post, so I have no idea if it's even true or not, but it said that if you hug or kiss somebody that you care about, like your wife, more than 6 seconds, that will release oxytocin. Is that correct?
I've seen this post. I don't know how accurate it is.
Okay.
I don't know how it is, but try it. What do you got to lose?
I mean, I'll say this, like, I told my wife that, and so we started doing longer hugs, and I have noticed that, yes, it feels great, but what I've also noticed, and maybe this is like a brain thing, I don't know, but like when I hold her, when I hug her, and I know that we're like there in that moment, and no one's trying to get to the next thing, we're just there.
Yeah,
It's euphoric. Like it's almost like time slows down and the world just gets quieter. That's about the best way I could describe it.
I think you're saying, I mean, based on what you're saying, I think it's relatively accurate. Remember, you have 4 kids, right?
Yeah.
Remember when you first held your child the first time, or during that first year, the first 3 years for men, right? It's like anytime you held your daughter, your son, like nothing mattered. Time stopped. That's oxytocin, right? So based on what you're saying, I could see it to be valid as a valid statement to that. I don't know if it's clinically accurate. It doesn't matter. Who cares? If it works and it makes you feel better, then use it. Do it all day long, right? I think we need more of that. I think we need more of that in place. And it's funny, we hear all these, my work of my life has been like taking all these one love and all we need is love and all these things that are out there. And all we really need is oxytocin. Like that, it's not going on a banner anytime soon, unless it's a nerve testing company or something like that. But all we need is oxytocin.
All we need is a little oxytocin.
All we need is a little oxytocin.
What about, What about you mentioned epinephrine and norepinephrine? That's something that I don't ever see, anybody really, even in the health field, really talk much about. How does that impact us?
So let's blow your listener's mind.
Okay.
Okay. Dopamine chases upward.
Okay.
Okay. So you go after this. This is where you are. This is baseline. You chase up towards dopamine, and it goes up, and you're like, oh, I got to attain this goal. I got to go after this goal. I got to go after this goal. And if you come short of the goal, you didn't hit the goal. There's a place in the brain called the habenula that gets activated. And then you drop. And it drops down below the midway point, and the bottom part of this releases norepinephrine and epinephrine. These are the stress neurotransmitters. They're called catecholamines. Okay? So what I'm saying is that, and they activate what's called the sympathetic nervous system. And the sympathetic, and people know about that, the sympathetic nervous system is the fight or flight nervous system. So watch this now. Now let's go to the entrepreneurs in your crowd. The more goals you're setting that are delusional goals, the more you're activating your sympathetic nervous system, causing you anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts, and bipolar tendencies.
By having goals that are too big?
By having goals that are too big. Because what the flip side of that activates this norepinephrine and epinephrine. And so the bigger the goal, you chase it. Think about it. Every time you set a big goal, you get anxious, you get nervous, you get scared. It's like, and you've heard these things, like all the motivational talk is great. The bigger the goal, the better it is. If it scares you a little bit, then it's right. Not true. Not true at all. Biologically, not true in any capacity. But we sit and say, I got to go chase that goal. And if you're chasing the goal, not being and attaining, then what you're doing is you're flipping the other side. And you're now activating the other stress neurotransmitter. And so the more dopamine we bring up, the more we have to see the other side, because what goes up has to go down.
So when we're goal setting, is it best to identify more realistic goals?
That's a great question. I'm doing a goal workshop tonight, but yeah, you want to set goals that are stretching but attainable. That you want them to be. Your brain works on 10% measurements. It can grow by 10% at a time and manage it. That's the key, is managing it. If you can't manage that factor, then what you're going to end up doing is you're going to stretch yourself too far and create this elastic band that kind of snaps. We want to be able to manage the growth that we're creating. For example, right? Tony Robbins has a great line. Most people are, what they can do in a year is impossible. If they do it over 30 years, it's something along that lines, right? I'm paraphrasing it, but it's great. Most people set a goal for this timeline, but if you said, hey, look, let me do this over 10 years, it's a different game. It's a different game plan altogether. Most people want to build I'll use a company as $1 million or $2 million or $10 million company in a year. Why not do it in 3 years? So that you can manage the growth.
Yeah, because even if you hit the goal, right, then you've got to keep up with the growth, which causes you to basically introduce in more goals, because you got to achieve,
and you can't manage it.
Wow, interesting. So when you're, so like for instance, if we're setting a goal, and let's just use $1 million, like I just think it's a round number. If we're setting a goal and be like, hey, by next year, I'm going to be at 5 million. Yeah. Like, and deep down, we're like, I don't even know if that's possible, but I'm going to set it. Are we setting ourselves up for disaster, or is it better to be like, you know what, by this time, but in 1 year, I think I could probably get to 1.5.
Let me separate the two sides.
Okay.
Because my scaling wizards, my scaling masters in business, well, no, that's how you do it. You scale faster, you can grow, then you can sell, and you create. All my private equity guys in that space are going to say, no, that's what you do. You have to do that so they can sell fast. I get that. I understand that side of business. Now let me take that from the conversation of health. Two different conversations, right? From the health side, stretching yourself to 5 million, and you've never even managed 2, 3, 4 million in the process, is going to cause you anxiety, stress, and it's going to create much more of a rift within you. Now, if you have someone in saying, you know what, let me get to 1.5, then 1.2 and 2.5 and 3, then what happens is all of a sudden you've got manageable growth that you know how to manage yourself through. Then if you sit and say, hey, look, and I'm going to say this, and there are going to be people like, no, that doesn't make any sense. I don't want to do that. I want to go bigger. I get it. Bigger does not mean more manageable. Bigger just means bigger. It has to lead with the crash that comes afterwards. Yeah. And if you've been in business long enough, you know exactly that, because we're really good at going, chasing and pursuing and attaining. But then what happens is the destruction on the back end, and we've got to make sure we manage that.
That makes a lot of sense. Whew. So let's just say, you know, patient comes in, presents with, I'm exhausted. I'm completely fried. I'm burnt out. My libido isn't what it used to be. I kind of have racing thoughts. I feel like I can't get enough sleep. And my temper is really, really bad. I get agitated easily. What do I do? And then I feel like a lot of times if we go and see our normal doctors, they just want to give us a pill. Like
they do.
Yeah.
Well, they don't, you know, and I don't want to, medicine has a tremendous value in our society. I don't want to take away from that. I think it's foolish to say medicine isn't valuable, but for lifestyle basis, I think medicine's very lost. Yeah. From a lifestyle perspective. You know, you still have doctors who are saying that you need to drink milk for calcium in your bones. I mean, that's a 1980s, like, it's craziness that's out there. But I think that, so if someone presents in that capacity, you got to look at the cause. Medical doctors or medical, I don't want to justify all that, but the medical approach will be, here's a pill to numb it, cover it, and cover up the symptom. And even lab work, believe it or not, I'm going to say this, and this is going to sound so controversial, blood work is a symptom. Blood work is looking at where your blood was months ago. It's a symptom. It's not the cause.
Months ago? So it can be. Tell me about that.
Yeah. It could be up to a month, several months ago, because it takes the body time to change. Right? So an A1C, for example, is 3 months ago. Now, if you're looking at, you know, your acute lymphocytes and blood work from that capacity, where you're looking at literally, you know, infections and things like that, that's a different capacity. I'm not speaking to that. I'm speaking about lifestyle markers. So lifestyle markers could trail in behind. So you can say, oh, I'm eating better for this week. My blood work is going to be better. Not necessarily true. It's looking in time. So you got to be careful with it. But I think they're going to give you a pill, a potion, something to numb it or drug it to cover up the mask of the symptom of it. And we're just literally, this is why I don't like blood work. You're in St. Louis. I was there in St. Louis. Blood work in St. Louis is very different than blood work in California and blood work in Mississippi. Let me give you an example. What blood labs do, they take the average of the environment in which you're in. So if you're in St. Louis and the average cholesterol levels, let's use that as an example, is 200, then your markers are going to be the average of that. Now, if you go over to California, you take that blood test the day after in California, and let's say, I don't know that it is, but let's say normal is between 160 and 180 there. Now you're going to have high cholesterol there. And if I take you on Sunday and I take you across and I take you to Mississippi, where the average cholesterol there is 300 because of lifestyle, because diet and fried foods, you're going to show a 200. You're going to be low on cholesterol, nothing to worry about. It has nothing to do with actually how healthy are you. It's based on the environment that you're in.
Interesting. So how do you guys test then?
I don't test that. I don't look for that. What I look for is the neurotransmitters. I look for the brain and see that. I want to cover that first because that's the core that I'm looking at, right?
It's like, from what you're saying, it's like, that's kind of like it's mission control.
It is mission control.
Okay.
Once you get that in place, because my whole philosophy, in our whole philosophy, in our world, in our company, is a mind first approach, a brain first approach. How do you think? We got to get a mind first approach. Everything else is body up. No one's going mind first down.
Interesting. So that's fascinating. Like I mean, cause so it's funny. My background is health. I mean, granted, I'm not nearly as educated as you are. I got my undergrad degree in sports medicine with a minor in nutrition. And, but it's interesting you say that because even as you're talking about this, like I'm sitting there thinking like, it's almost like changing your tires in your car when the engine is about ready to just give out.
Pretty much. I've never thought
Right?
about it. Kind of, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Or
Wow.
changing,
Okay.
the doors and painting the doors.
Right. But the engine's not working right.
But the engine's not working. Now, again, I'm not speaking, if you have a real pathology and real cardiac issues and things like that, like I'm not speaking to that.
Right.
I'm not speaking to that at all. I'm speaking to lifestyle, stress, day-to-day life. That's what I'm talking in respect to.
Right. So we're not talking about someone who's got like tremendous like onset of disease of some sort, right? We're talking about like a patient like myself, right? I'm knocking on the doorstep at 50 years old. I come to you, I'm like, hey man, everything I just shared with you, this is what's going on. And then, we want to take a look at neurotransmitters, correct? And just see where those are at. And so is that a urine test?
It's a urine and a spit test.
Interesting. Okay. And then depending on what comes back, let's just say, you're like, hey man, like you're low on dopamine, you're low on serotonin, or whatever you think I might present with. What would be a treatment plan that you would put me on?
It depends, right? But if I had just said like a generic space first thing I got to do is I got to get your mind first, right?
Yeah.
First thing I got to get you to get identify who is Larry. I got to get you to understand who are you. So we have a process where we identify an individual's values and identities. Once you know what that is, neurologically, not arbitrarily, I will show you when you look at it and say, oh, this is ultimately who I am. I get this now. Okay, now this is what you are. Then I got to get you, and then I help you organize your mission. Right? What is your bigger mission? What is the bigger play that you really are here to do? Right? Obviously, educating community is a very important part of your world, and helping dads is a big part of it. So there's a mission to that. But I would suspect that many of your listeners are struggling to find that mission. I don't call it a purpose. I call it a mission specifically. That's a huge component. Then we got to get you to get through some of the old past resentment, some guilt, some shame, some things that you're really holding that are preventing you from actually upping your oxytocin and valuing yourself. Second step I'd take you into is I'd get your body moving. I got to get your body moving. And then third, before I even get into diet, I got to clean your gut. I got to clean your gut out. I got to heal the gut from what you're doing. If I do those three things, sleep is going to follow right behind that. And I know when I get you to move enough, think enough, get your body and stomach, sleep is ready to recover. But you can't get to the sleep point unless the mind is calm, the body is getting rid of excess sugars, the stomach is actually making serotonin, melatonin, and cortisol balances in the body. Then sleep follows that, typically in my experience.
So melatonin is also made in the gut?
Melatonin is not made in the gut. Melatonin is it's a cofactor that's needed. Once your serotonin comes in, you can actually regulate your circadian rhythm.
Interesting. Okay. And so what is the process of, finding out what you value? Like, how do you take somebody through something like that?
Yeah, I've got a whole process I take people through. It's all questions. It's all questions when you look at your life and, like, what do you really do? Most people live a life where they're living on the things that they think that they have to do rather than things that they love to do. Yeah. Right? And when you start asking yourself different questions, you said, saying, what is really important to me? Because your life dictates what's really important to you. You just don't follow it. You think it's something else, but your life dictates what's really, really important to you. You said you did 1,300 episodes, Larry. That's a lot of episodes. 10 years, kudos to you for that commitment. Obviously, helping men is super important to you. Being a dad is super important to you. That's why you call it the Dad's Edge, right? Dad's Edge podcast. Like that is super important. So that is a tremendous, tremendous value for what you provide to people. And I think it's great. But that is going to be there. Family, marriage, those are important to you. But a lot of times people will sit and say, what's important to me is God, family, business, because that's what I was told to do. But your life demonstrates something completely different.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that incongruency creates judgment, and those judgments creates emotions, and those emotions create illness.
I'm going to ask you a really loaded question here.
Sure, shoot.
And it's something that, have you ever heard of Bedros Keuilian?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know him. I've heard of him. I've seen
little
bits and pieces. I don't know him personally or anything.
Bedros is a great guy. I've worked with him in the past, and I've done a few of his events, and I talk to him regularly. And I really love a lot of the things he puts out. And he has one post. I mean, if you follow Bedros for long enough, you'll notice that I think he kind of goes through a cycle of posting certain things at certain times. And he put in a post, and it got a lot of flack and also got a lot of applause at the same time. It was very mixed, but it literally just said exactly what not exactly what you just said, but similar, is that he created this post that said, if you are suffering from anxiety and depression, most likely you don't need another pill from your doctor. You're not living in congruency with who you really are.
There's truth to that.
Okay. Can you expand upon that?
There's more to it. But there's truth to that. There's truth to that. But the more incongruent you are with who you are, incongruent to who you are, the more stress you create on the system, more judgments you create, the more emotions you create. The more emotions put your body into a sympathetic stress state. Anxiety doesn't happen in a parasympathetic state, in a relaxed state. Anxiety happens in a stress state. So when you want to do X, but you keep doing Y, your body will create anxiety as a stress mechanism because you really want to do the other thing, but you're not honoring who you are.
And I would think that this is probably one of the biggest battles, especially for men, because like you said it earlier, that there's a lot of guys out there that they're in this job, they're providing for their families. It's kind of like this wash, rinse, repeat. And, they feel trapped.
They did. I did too. I'm not here at Ivory Tower. I was the same way. Like, I said I wanted to teach people and help people across the world, help them live healthy, live authentically who they are. That's really what I want to teach people. And I wanted to create the science to help people, what I call the science of fulfillment. That's what I wanted to teach people. That's it. I just want to teach you how to be fulfilled. This is how you do this in life. And then go be who you are and go live your ultimate life. Like that's to me is the game. But I wasn't there. Like I had to go through my own process. I was 34 years old, miserable as hell, 50 pounds overweight, smoking cigarettes, drinking like a fish. And I remember sitting at my birthday party and everyone downstairs, and I was just like, what? Is this it? Like, I've got a great wife, I've got great kids, I've got this house I'm in, I've got a Mercedes, I've got an Audi, I've got a Lexus, the cars I've always dreamed. When I was 10 years old, you told me that in my driveway, I was rich, I got everything I wanted. Now the levels maybe gone up with these kids, right? Now it's higher levels that people want, but I was good. And but I was miserable. Internally, I was miserable. And I had to go through this whole journey myself to become really congruent with who I am.
Interesting. Are you doing okay on time, by the way?
I don't know.
Hey, it's 5 minutes after the hour.
Can I yell something? Can you pause or something?
Yeah, that's fine.
Hey, Amanda. Let me see if this person showed up.
Recording in progress.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay.
Heard that this person didn't show, so.
Okay, cool. I just wanted to, the thing that I wanted to get to next was, someone comes in, they present with some of these things. You test them, take them through a protocol, that good stuff. What has been some of the results you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, it's been crazy. I'm not going to lie. Like, I don't really do I have one-on-one clients that I work with, but typically my goal is much bigger. Like, I don't have a practice or a clinic that people come to anymore. Like, I got rid of that 10 years ago because I wanted to get to more people. So I got rid of the brick and mortar practice type thing. I've had cases where people have had lupus and in a day rewired lupus. I've had cases where people, Crohn's disease, literally that was about like almost killed the lady 3 times, and 26 minutes later no longer had Crohn's disease.
Is that possible?
I do it. I have done it hundreds of times. So is it medically possible? If probably not. But do I do it? Do I see it? Do I see it happen? Yes, because here's what happens. And scientifically, yes, it is completely possible. Because if the brain is stuck in your stomach and your colon and all these autoimmune disorders are now just stuck in a frozen sympathetic state, you allow the body to express itself, and it actually can become what it needs to be. Kind of was saying earlier, right? The body has the ability to heal itself. You just need to give it that environment to do so. When we rebalance the brain and rewire the brain, you're allowing oxygen to move to that part of the body, and the oxygen then allows the body to facilitate its normal process.
Interesting. So when you say 26 minutes, so what happens within these 26 minutes?
So it's just literally questioning. I'm finding the points where the people are actually what I call a root experience. I don't like the term trauma. Trauma, people think, oh, I wasn't, molested or that. Like everyone's got their trauma. But there could be something called positive trauma. There could also be negative trauma. You could have positive traumas, like the times where you're valedictorian, the more successful you become. These are positive traumas that are affecting your brain. You just don't realize it. Because as a society, we say, hey, it's good, it's good. So you got to be careful of that. But so these things are all affecting. So what I do is I'm rebalancing through questions. So it's a neurocognitive behavioral process. It's called the CBT, cognitive behavior. I'm just asking questions. There's no wires. There's no electrical cords. It's me sitting, you and I chatting, talking, and going through and finding out where it is, and then kind of doing the work behind it.
Can I ask you a personal question?
Sure.
So, the audience knows like my backstory and like really crazy childhood. And, I didn't even, a lot of crazy stuff happened. And my wife and I went to just a marriage therapy session, and we do this, like we go for preventative maintenance, and we decided, we're like, you know what? We've been seeing the same therapist for like 20 years. I'm not even kidding, like 20 years. And he kind of moved far away. So we're like, you know what? Let's just try somebody different. Let's just see what new approach. And so like we went and saw this woman, and this was just last week. We sat down, and she's like, this first session, I'm going to get to know Larry first. And then the next session, I'll get to know Jessica. And she took me through all these questions about my background. And it's been a long time since I've had anyone sit me down, ask me questions about like the stuff that's happened. And I noticed, and through even this conversation, I'm wondering the validity to it, because I think it was very valid what I probably experienced. But I got in the car, and my wife looked at me and she's like, that was surreal. And I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, I've known you for 28 years and I know everything about you. And there wasn't anything in that meeting that I didn't already know. She's like, but hearing it and sitting there, it was very surreal to me, because I sit there and I'm like, how in the world are you alive still? How in the world are you not an addict of some sort? How in the world are you not in jail? Like, and I'm like, and I looked at her, I was like, yeah, I don't know either. And I kind of like laughed about it. But here's what I'll tell you. That was a week ago. And that conversation I've noticed it's impacted me. It's been a long time since I've brought that stuff up or talked about it. And I was like, and it almost like it ruffled feathers in there, if that makes any sense. Is there validity to that?
100%.
Really? So like, what do you, when we talk about that stuff I know it's therapeutic, but is it also kind of dangerous short term?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I'll say it this way. It's healthier to bring it up and address it than keep it hidden and let it cause illness and disease.
I know I keep saying one more question, but like, I am curious, just from your opinion, men are really terrible at that. Like we don't want to talk about it. In fact, we'll give so many reasons why we don't. And, or it's not manly, or we're not strong, or we're weak if we do. Isn't it the opposite? Like if we don't talk about this stuff, we're really putting ourselves in some serious health jeopardy, aren't we?
We do. We typically do, right? Yeah, there's no question that we do. And the scary thing about it is, honestly, like, we have a society that, you asked me before this call, is most of my clientele male or female? And it's actually far more female, because women are more emotionally aware. in that capacity. Now, it sounds like from talking to you, especially, right? And if you're representative of your community, that your community is going to be very emotionally aware as well.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think real power sits in being a very emotionally aware man. That's real power, to be aware of yourself and aware of your emotions and to be able to use them. And that's kind of what I teach my son, right? Like I have a 16-year-old son and he is emotionally grounded as they come. Like he is centered and focused but it's because we're just grounding. We're just constantly grounding. And I didn't have that when I was 16 years old. God, it would have saved me so much of a headache. But
right. Yeah.
But I think that's what it comes down to. And I think that's what I've been working on for my own life and my own journey is to become more and more emotionally aware. I spent 2.5 hours this morning, or an hour and a half this morning. I had something come up as a trigger for me yesterday. And I just sat down this morning. I was like, I gotta rewire this. I gotta go through this and clear this out because it was really pressing on me. I got up earlier than I normally do. I normally sleep like a rock from 9:30 to 6, but I got up at 5 and I was like, first thing on my brain, this is something I got to work through. And I did. I worked through it and I cleared it out and it was done. It was over.
Do you mind me asking like what you did?
It's a series of processes, a series of questions that I do, but I give you a simple process that I teach people, right? It's a 4-step simple process that you can take. Take any event that you have in your life. It doesn't matter what event it is. Take any event that you have and then what actually happened, right? So what was the event? Maybe let's just say that I'll use an extreme case. Maybe your dad slapped you. Let's just use that as an example. Okay, well, what's the belief? The belief is dad shouldn't have slapped me. Right? That's a belief. That's why you're angry. It's where you're resentful. But that's what actually happened. And then what your belief was. He shouldn't have slapped me. That's why I'm pissed off. Okay, what's the anti-belief? Now, I don't want to go, there's more to that in the science of what I'm doing because you have parts of your brain that actually have anti-neurons. So what's the anti-belief? The belief is that sometimes dads had to slap to teach you a lesson. Okay. And what was the benefit? If he had done that, what would have been the drawback to you? If he actually didn't slap, what would have been the drawback? And you realize that, everything just kind of balances itself out. It's like, okay, now there's no longer, that emotion dissipates.
So it's really, I mean, I know this is oversimplified and there's more to it, but it's really just looking at both sides of the coin versus maybe focusing too much on the belief, correct?
The belief is a symptom. That's what I've learned.
Really? Man.
The belief is actually a symptom.
Because the belief could be wrong?
The belief always is wrong. Because the belief is exactly what you think you're living. But I guarantee you, if I show you a different part of life, they'll say, that belief is actually incorrect. Because there's another side of that belief. There's always two beliefs that exist.
Can we play with this for a second?
Sure.
Do you want to ask me anything like that I might believe in and maybe challenge me on it? Because I'd love to, yeah.
Also, give me an event that happened.
Okay. My 18-year-old son, I was walking in the garage and I noticed there was a ding on his bumper. Like sure. The car was hit or he hit something. Didn't know which one. I went into my wife and I said, "Hey, do you know what happened to Ethan's car?" And she's like, I asked him. He said he didn't know what happened. He said that someone must have hit him. And I really looked at the dent and I was like, he backed into something. And then you can clearly see where he turned the car and it just scraped the other side of the bumper. So I went and I knocked on his door and I said, "Hey, what happened to your car?" And he's like, "What do you mean?" And this is great. I almost laughed, but I was a little too pissed to laugh, but I was just like, that's a good try. But he's just like, I don't know what happened. He's like, I noticed it just the other day. I was like, Ethan, I go, I need you to be honest with me. I was like, because judging by the impact and then the turn, it looks like you backed into something and then we're turning out of something. I was like, he's like, yeah. He's like, I might have hit a lamppost on accident. And I'm like, you might have? And he goes, yeah, I really don't remember. I didn't really feel it. I'm like, it sounds like there's really not a whole lot of continuity to this story. I was like, why don't you just tell me what happened? And he's like, I hit the lamppost at school. And I'm like, okay. I was like, why did you lie to your mom? And he's like, I don't know. And I'm like, and I was ticked off. So yeah, that was a situation. And yeah.
So it's like that. So the belief is that he's always supposed to tell the truth.
Yeah.
Okay. And what's the anti-belief?
That he won't.
Okay. So he won't. And what was the benefit to you that he didn't?
The benefit that he didn't?
Yeah.
I don't know if there was a benefit.
Well, there was. There was.
A benefit to him?
The benefit to you.
The benefit to me?
Yeah. Did it make you become more discerning, to always be more aware of what kids are doing, to realize that they're not always going to tell the truth? You never tell it. Nobody ever tells the truth.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great. So does that make you a better father?
To know that he's not always going to tell me the truth?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that make you then be more grounded with your son, to realize that, you know what, I can't expect him to always be truthful. I have to be present to actually hear what he has to say and give an environment to do so?
Wow. I like literally, as you just said that, I was like,
that's right. That's exactly what happens.
Oh my God. That's wild. So what just happened? Like I literally just feel more calm.
That's right. It's exactly right.
Like almost refreshed.
That's right.
Wow. That's crazy.
That's what rewiring is.
So, and is it just training? I'm sure it's not just this, but part of this is exactly how you started the whole thing, training someone how to rethink.
It is.
Oh my gosh. That's incredible. Wow. So it's really our perception and the story and the belief of what is happening in our lives that is probably causing us the agony.
You said it well. I couldn't have said it better myself, my friend.
Dang. Okay. So how we now have guys who I guarantee want to reach out to you and start asking questions. What is the process of how you work with people?
So first thing you got to do is you got to do a neuro test. We got to get this brain performance test to say, okay, where's your brain at? I got to look at the neurotransmitters and see. From that, then let's look at it and say, where are you at? I mean, if we have programs for people to take them through all 5 pillars to make sure, because doing one, sure, the mental piece is one thing, but now let's get all of it in place, right? Let's make you unshakable, what I call create an unshakable health inside you. This is the mind first approach that is missing in healthcare.
I would say so, yeah.
This is the mind first approach that's missing in healthcare. And that's what we're trying to solve.
How did you learn this?
Through 30 years.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, this is not like a course. This is like practice.
This is practice.
Wow. This is incredible.
This is one tool that I use. This is one of my tools. I have about 120 tools that I use to rewire.
And a lot of it is it just, some of it's got to be just posing different questions to yourself when you might be in this state of mind.
It's all questions.
Wow.
It's all the right questions to rebalance the brain and where it's at.
It's amazing.
You have everything you need within you, my friends. Like, you have all of it available to you if we understand how to train. Like, if you think about it, right? I like to say, I'm not going to tell you how to think. I didn't say your son was right or wrong, good or bad. The funny thing is, okay, here's the funny thing. Larry, last week, my son ran into my car the exact same way.
They went to the same driving school.
It must have. He runs into my car, and he comes into the house, and he's like, Dad, I'm like, what's the matter? He's like, I hit your car. And I'm like, first of all, in my head, I'm like, which car? He goes, I hit your Porsche. And I'm like,
oh no.
Okay. So I go outside. I look at it. His bumper's all messed up and torn. And then the front, now lucky it's an older SUV, so it wasn't, but it's dinged up. It's probably going to cost me $3,000 to $5,000 in repairs and this and that. He's like, Dad, I'm so sorry. I hit your Porsche. Oh my God. I'm like, relax, kid. Relax. And he's like, why aren't you ready to kill me? What's the matter? I said, because the first response in my head the emotional response was be pissed off. But I've just worked through so much of it. It's just like, okay, cool. It's fine. He's like, I don't understand. Like, his sister's like, why aren't you killing him? Why aren't you killing him?
Why aren't you killing him?
Why, there's no need to kill him. It's just, and so the funny story of it is that I completely get the pain is my point.
Yeah. You should have just answered your daughter and be like, because he needs to clean his room and I don't want to do it. And if he's dead, he won't do it.
This is it. Yeah, clean up all this crap.
Oh my gosh, man. Hey, this has been so awesome, man. I want to make sure that we put everything in the show notes of best resources to find you and that kind of thing. Because I would imagine you're going to have a lot of guys reaching out to you. This is really good stuff.
Oh, thank you.
Where is the best place for that?
So go to drrewire.com. On social media, just go to Dr. Rewire everywhere. There's an app that I use that I can help people rewire as well. You literally just talk into the app. And that's on my website as well. If people want to jump on and do the test, I think the test is honestly the best place to start, because you get to see, okay, where's my brain really at? Let me get a full picture diagnostically and see where am I starting. And then we see what's right for you. And if I can help you, great. If I can't, no sweat either. No big deal. But at least you know where you need to do. And if it's just a matter of a couple of supplements, you can take some supplements and balance yourself too.
That's really cool, man. But you have a whole community around this too, correct?
I do. We have a whole community. I've trained people. I have coaches that I've certified to do this stuff as well. So my goal is to really shake up healthcare with this.
Yeah.
And it's like when I sat down with Damon, he's like, Doc, he goes, nobody's doing what you're doing. What you're saying is a whole nother level. I said, I know. And he's like, you're playing a game at a different level. You know Gary Brecka is?
I do not. Who's that?
Gary Brecka is a big celebrity biohacker, and then he's spoken at a bunch of my events too. And he's like, Doc, you're 20 years ahead of your time, because this stuff is so profound. He's seen me do the work. So
that is really cool.
However,
man.
I can help your community, happy to serve them. I know it's hard. It's hard being a guy in today's world. I'll say that. It is hard. It is hard being a guy in today's world. And if I can help men be men without being, I'll say it this way. There's I don't want to call it toxic masculinity, but there is an over masculinity that's in the marketplace. And the more you pump yourself with any of these needles, people are thinking, oh, that's masculine. I don't know if that's the case. I'm not saying I don't think that's the case. I think masculine is knowing yourself and raising your own testosterone internally. That's really more masculine, I think.
I agree. I've often, my grandpa used to tell me the most dangerous man in the room is the quietest. So just be careful.
There's truth.
It's the one who's not reacting like a total crazy person.
There's truth to that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Dr. Rewire, this was awesome. I really appreciate you coming on. And I know we're gonna have a lot of guys that reach out to you. Guys, you can go to thedadedge.com/519 for this show. Again, thedadedge.com/519 for this podcast if you want to connect with Dr. Rewire. In the meantime, I just want to thank you for coming on. This was really good, really beneficial, and I wish I would have talked to you 2 days ago when I confronted my son, because I've been pissed for 48 hours, and now I'm not so pissed.
There you go. It's that simple.
Thanks again, man.
You're welcome, brother.